and I am recording it now. And we will be posting it to YouTube following the end of the meeting. So first, really quick, some introductions. Michael Burris, I've been talking to all of you from afar. I actually haven't had the pleasure to meet everyone yet, unfortunately. Also with us, we have our Assistant Director, Jenny Snap, and Matt Brown and Terry Barr. They're all from NEP. And we also have Carrie Reeds here. He's the Director of Urban Design and Planning at Neighborhood Design Center. And if you remember in your packets, there were a couple of development concepts right at the end of the packet. Him and his staff came up with those concepts, and so he'll be talking about those a little later on in the presentation. So if you refer to the first page in your packets, at the very bottom of that page, there's an agenda. And I just want to go over basically what we're going to be reviewing today. So first thing we'll be going over are revisions that we did to the future land use map. To be more of a quick review, to just identify some of the things that we changed. Really the substance of this meeting is going to be second item on there, or second and third items on there, which are to compare and contrast things that are different with Urbancrest's zoning map, and with compare and contrast things that are different with the land use map and the current zoning map. So we'll be determining what you like and dislike about those maps and whether things should be combined. And then following that discussion, we'll turn it over to Carrie to present some of those development concepts and infrastructure concepts. These are a range of ideas to imagine what Urbancrest could look like in the future. And so what we want your role to be as the working committee is to determine whether or not these options would be okay to take to a public meeting. So we're not necessarily saying this is what we're going to go with for the public meeting, but we just want a range of options that we can take to the public. So before moving on, I just want to ask, are there any questions about what we're covering here today? All right, so with that, I'll move on to the future land use revisions. Matt, do we want to do share screens, or we don't actually have anyone from the committee on video right now? So
you go ahead and still share the screen. Okay. And for everyone that has called into the meeting, if you're not speaking, if you could please mute your line. We're getting a lot of background feedback. You can do that on your phone. There should be a mute, unmute button, or by using #6, I believe, is the mute and unmute function.
All right, so again, we're gonna go over the changes we made to the future land use map. This is the first map that was in the packet. It was on the smaller piece of paper. It's got the map on one side and a bunch of text on the left. So again, I just want to do a brief review of this, and we'll talk about what you dislike when we get to the second set of the maps. So first, if you look at the area outlined in number 1, so that's along Main Street. In response to some concerns about changing some of the single family character across Main Street, we reduced the extent of more dense residential uses to just be between Main Street and Augustus Street. And then for items, you look at near where the YMCA and Village Hall is, on the Community Baptist Church, that's item number 2. And then at the intersections of Main Street and Central Avenue, 3 and 4. These were all areas that were in our initial proposal were supposed to be neighborhood commercial areas. And there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm about these neighborhood commercial areas. So we removed those areas from the plan, and we just selected adjacent zoning districts, so they were grouped in with like land uses. Excuse me. So then, moving on to across the railroad tracks in item 5. So that's the area that's outlined in red. That area was also previously supposed to be a neighborhood commercial area, but based on the feedback that we had received following the last meeting, mixed uses were removed from the plan. And so because we removed mixed use from the plan, we had to come up with some other alternative proposal for this area. And so the idea that we landed on was to make this an area that is multi-use but not mixed use. So it's kind of like you could have interspersed residential and commercial.
Excuse me, you sort of broke up in that sentence, and we didn't really get to hear everything that you said concerning that area. So if you could repeat that, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Sure. Mayor Barnes, was that for item 5 you're talking about?
Yes, the area where we're talking about now, I guess we're talking about the red section and the brown section. I guess those are townhouses or something you were saying concerning mixed uses, but then you broke up.
Oh, okay.
I didn't catch all that.
And Michael, I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier. To mute yourself, if you called in, it is *6. That will mute your line. And if you want to speak or say something, then you do *6 again, and that will unmute your line. So for those that called in.
All right. So the red area would not have a mix of uses anymore, but it could have on different pieces of land, residential next to commercial. So you wouldn't have any mixing of uses in buildings anymore, but it could be on separate pieces of land in the area. And then on the last one, it's the area in pink. It's a little small. It's basically the village's frontage on Broadway. This is an area that we also proposed to be mixed use and needed to change that. So we wanted to propose that this area be reserved for commercial space. It's high visibility. It's the gateway to the village on Broadway. It has great access to it. You know, there's I-270 right up the street, and it's on a main arterial as well. So there are a lot of benefits to having that access there for commercial businesses. So that about wraps up the revisions. Are there any questions about the changes themselves? Not necessarily about what you like and dislike about this, because we'll do that with the next set of maps. All right, so we'll move on to the next. Was there a question or comment? All right, so we'll move on to the next set of maps, and this is on the larger piece of paper. It has 2 different maps on it. I'm gonna wait for our presentation to catch up. Okay. So for this exercise, we'll start on the west side of the village and identifying areas that are different in the current zoning map and the future land use map. And then we'll move on over to the east side of the village. I think that'll be the easiest way to keep track. So We'll start on the left side and move to the right. So the first difference between the zoning map and future land use map I'd like to identify is the tan area, which is the 2-family residential district in the current zoning map. This is, for a street reference, it's near the intersection of Lewis Center Way and 3rd Avenue. And so what we did with this area in the future land use map was to move it between the corridor between Main and Augusta Streets. And it's actually the same amount of land area. It's just concentrated in a more main thoroughfare that is near amenities. So generally, you would like more dense developments to be near amenities like access to transit or municipal services, things of that nature. So with that, I'll open it up for comment on that difference between the zoning map and the future land use map.
I'm looking at the future land use map, and I'm a little lost on what area we're talking about. I believe you said Augusta Street and Main Street.
Yeah, so it's the, on the current zoning map, there's the tan, kind of on the left-hand corner of the map. And then that shifted to more, shifted on the future land use map more to the center and that tan area, concentrated on 2nd Avenue and 4th Avenue.
Oh, okay, I see it. Up to Augusta.
Right.
Okay, I'm looking at it. Oh, okay, I see the change. Thanks.
So what did you think about that, Richard? Do you think that's located correctly, or should it stay where it is? What are your...
I think it's located correctly because it's at the front of the village once you come across the railroad tracks.
Right.
Yeah, and they can get to it easily without getting lost in the rest of Urbancrest. So I'm agreeing with what you got there.
All right. Thank you for providing that. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on this? All right. Well, if there's no further comment, you can always feel free to send me an email or text or whatever. If you feel more comfortable commenting that way too, that's fine. So we'll move on to item 2. Steve, did you have a comment?
No.
Okay. So the second difference we want to highlight, this one's a pretty easy to see one. You'll see on the current zoning map, there aren't any areas highlighted in green. And in the future land use map, there are a number of areas either highlighted in green or striped in green. We wanted to make sure that as the village changes over time, that there are areas that are dedicated to park space. And that was in response to the surveying that we got, that we wanted people wanted to, hold on a second, we have someone trying to get in the meeting. All right, so people wanted to make sure that there are places to recreate as the village changes. So one area that is highlighted is a parcel in the southwest section of Urbancrest. It's currently zoned industrial, and that in the future land use would be park space. There were a number of folks who said it's heavily forested back there, and it could be nice to have a walking trail or something like that. Also, we designated right along, I'll call it a green belt. It's a strip of parcels along the railroad tracks and on Augusta Street. And that could be, what was envisioned was a a buffer not only for the railroad tracks, but a buffer from the more intensive uses across the railroad tracks. So you could have, you know, trees and stuff that might screen those uses. And then we obviously have Mayor's Park. That's really central to the village and is a critical piece of recreation space. And then we also have the area that's striped in green, which has the YMCA, Union Baptist Church, and the municipal building, municipal hall. And this would be an area that could, you know, not just be only park space, but could be, you know, like the YMCA. So if they ever want to expand their gym or something, or for other community recreational uses in that area. So I know that's kind of a number of different pieces of land in the village, but it's all boils down to parks and recreation space. So does anybody have any comments on those parks and recreation spaces?
This is Coley. I got a comment.
Sure.
Looking at the future land use map, that what you have in green for future park space is all my property.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that property is zoned industrial, so got a few ideas, but future park space wasn't one of them. So I'm assuming that this is just a proposal to bring to the next meeting. It's not cast in stone. So I just wanted the committee to be aware that you're asking me, or looks like all my property become a park.
Sure.
And I don't know if that's in my plans, but I'm just bringing it to the attention of the committee. I don't want anybody to go away and think, oh, that's going to be a park up there.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay. Mr. Cooley, thank you for that. This is Matt Brown. One of the important things to note about the future land use map recommendations is that it does not change anybody's existing zoning. So you have your property down there that I think part of it has the light industrial zoning and part of it may be the two-family residential zoning. That zoning is still in place in that area. The future land use map, it is a recommendation for, you know, decision makers that if you ever wanted to maybe rezone your property to allow it to be used for another use or those types of things, the future land use map shows the community's desires for where various uses are wanted. This particular this particular area is, as you know, it's a fairly heavily wooded site. There may be some other environmental constraints with developing that site, and so the community identified through our surveying and the public meeting that this was an area of the community that they would like to see preserved if possible, but in no way, shape, or form does that actually change the current zoning of the property.
No problem. I'm on board with that.
This is Randy. Can we go back just a little bit to on the current zoning? We've got some two-family residential over in the Lewis Center Way, 3rd Avenue area, and it looks like we're pushing that up toward, recommending pushing that up toward the front of the property between Main Street and Augustus, and as well as looks like there's a proposal to have some higher density residential also in that same area off of 1st Avenue, 2nd, and Central Avenues as well. But then you just said that the green area there between the railroad and right off Augustus to the west side of that would be used as a buffer between the more heavily used residential and the like the single family residential, but yet you're leaving some of the higher density residential still on the west side of that buffer, and that those two statements kind of seem to be in conflict.
Sure. Yeah. And I was going to get to the medium density stuff too. But so what we did with the medium density, and for everyone who wants to follow along, that's kind of at the intersection of 1st Avenue and on Cooley Drive. And at that corner, we shifted that that recommendation for medium density to the area Randy was talking about, in the interest of putting more dense residential uses next to a variety of different amenities that I mentioned with the TAN district, the two-family residential district. And Randy, so to address your question or your comment, the more intensive uses that I was referring to would really be screening from the more intensive commercial uses, where there could be across the railroad tracks, where there could be parking lots or taller structures located across the railroad tracks. So, Randy, and in your perspective, is that too much concentration of density in that area, or what do you think about that?
It could be discussed, I'm sure. We're just, I guess, since the main goal that we kept hearing from most of the residents of Urbancrest during, from day one on this, was that they wanted to try to keep that country look and feel as much as possible. But the proposed land use seems to be expanding a little bit more so on the more heavily used or higher density residential. So that's where the question was coming into play.
Sure. So our idea behind it was to shift those two districts into more towards the railroad tracks, so that way you could have like a more intact single family area. But maybe we can look at it a little differently by dispersing it, is what I'm hearing. Does that make sense?
That makes sense what you're saying. It probably needs a little bit more discussion. So I don't want to hold up the discussion for that. So.
Okay. All right. So we can we've addressed everything west of the railroad tracks, and so the last one I've got, I think we can really address as a batch, because it's the most substantial change in the land use map. And so that's the whole area east of the railroad tracks. And so this is predominantly in the current zoning a single family residential district. In response to some of the surveying that, there was some indication that there was desire for more commercial uses, that residents could, be able to keep their money and spend their money in the community. And so to open up more space where you could do that, you could spend some, time and businesses that may locate along Broadway. So we have proposed that the area that's out, or the area that's in red in the future land use map, and the area that's in pink be accommodated of commercial uses, but yet also allowing some residential uses to also locate in the red. And then behind that area, in order to kind of scale it down, so there's not such a dramatic change in the size of and type of buildings, to allow a mixture of single family, duplexes, townhomes, whatever a developer may be interested in investing in the community. So does anyone have any comments about this area more generally?
this is Matt Brown, just to add on to what Michael has said. The real question I feel like that we'd like answered from the working committee is, do you think that the future land use map as it's presented here is at a point that it can be presented through a public engagement process? We don't want to get into a public engagement process with a map that the working committee doesn't think has any momentum. It's just got too many errors or issues with it that the community won't accept. So do the working committee members on the call think that this future land use map is at that point that it can go to the community for their feedback?
Cooley here. I think it's to the point where we can let the community look at it for the feedback. I'm in agreement with the future land use map as is.
Yeah, this is Mr. Larkins, and I feel the same way with Mr. Cooley. We can always tweak it if we need to.
This is Nikki. I'm sorry, Mayor Barnes. This is Councilwoman Nikki Ziegler-Zimmerman. I think we could present this to the community. I think this is a good starting point.
Anyone?
This is Mayor Barnes.
Sure.
And I'm looking at the proposed land use map, and where we got the single family duplexes and townhouses. I see where it goes below. Actually, it's stretched out all the way down to Main Street from Augustus, and I could see where that area could be pushed up a little more, because it's really going pretty deep into the community when it reaches Main Street. We got more of a multi or duplex type feeling because of the village campus area. And when I say the campus area, I'm talking about the municipal hall, the park, and so forth. That's right central in that area. I think dropping below that, the municipal area would probably bring some issues behind that. Other than that, as far as presenting, I think with that raised up somewhat, or pushed toward more toward the east, then it would. I could see it pretty much being ready to go. But that's my thought. We have other members on the committee.
And Mayor Barnes, this is Matt Brown. Do you have a thought of how far you think that area would need to be moved to the east? Do you think it'd be about the mid block between Main and the railroad tracks, or did you have an idea of where you thought that cutoff should be?
Yeah, I think the cutoff should be at the municipal hall, as it relates to the Harrison building. A cutoff at that point.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Any other thoughts? Any thoughts on that from Mr. Larkins or Mr. Cooley or Ms. Zimmerman?
I don't have any thoughts on that. I'm just still mulling that over.
Mayor Barnes, I have a follow-up question for you. What do you think? So if there were the cutoff point at the municipal hall, what do you think about the current mixture of, the way that single-family duplexes, townhomes, the dark brown is on First Avenue and Central, and duplexes and single-family are on Second and Fourth? How do you feel about having it kind of, that alternating of density?
Actually, I don't. it would sort of make the village look like a jigsaw puzzle.
Yes.
We're trying to, and this is the mayor just talking. We're trying to keep things solidified. When we're in an area, it's identified as that area, and single family residential. Because when you get into a duplex or a multi-building, then you got different types of families. So you got your residential family, where it's single family, and then you're going to have your multi-use families, and those are different animals when they're mixed, and that's something that we don't want to do, because you're going to end up with some of those single family residentials, which may have some seniors or people who are headed that way, and they want their property space, and then you're going to have that multi-use, which is pretty much like city use, and people are sitting or living on top of each other. So, and when I say living or sitting on top of each other, I'm talking about buildings connected, or apartments across, or their doorways across the hall from each other, or side by side. That's a different nature of an animal altogether. So I don't see that very much. But like I said, there are other members on the committee, so they have to look at it the way that they see. But you asked the question of me, so that's my answer.
Sure. So,
Okay. I have an idea or a suggestion. Since we have the municipal hall and our community center in one location, why not try to migrate the light industrial or the light commercial closer to that area and have the residential around it? So in a sense, First Avenue is a main thoroughway through the community. It'd be easily accessible, easy to get to the light commercial, and all the houses be, away from that. Does that seem a little more doable?
Nikki, so you're looking at just south of the Village Hall. Is that on First?
Well, I was thinking of the area around that, even from Main Street to Augustus, if that was the light industrial. And on Second Avenue was more of your residential, so it don't create so much of a hodgepodge of light industrial mixed with residential, or I'm sorry, I keep saying industrial, but light commercial mixed with residential, and then it's all chopped up like they were speaking of.
So the limited, the commercial is all currently shown as along, east of the railroad tracks, primarily along Broadway. There's no commercial shown west of the railroad tracks.
Oh, I'm sorry. What is that tan color?
That's the single family and duplexes.
Oh, okay.
And so the idea with the dark brown and the tan through that section between Main and Augustus, from First down to is that Central, I think.
Yeah.
The idea of kind of alternating that land use recommendation was such that there could be, at the property owner's discretion, you could have single family home, you could have duplexes, you could have townhomes, and creating a vibrant mix of residential uses that can fit together and work together. I understand Mayor Barnes' concern with that, but I think that some of the work that the Neighborhood Design Center has done for us, as far as putting together some conceptual things, might help illustrate how those different housing types could look together.
Okay.
But I think, as Mr. Larkins mentioned earlier, this is something that with the public input, this will be tweaked. This isn't anything that's set in stone. The purpose of the whole process is that we collect feedback, we make revisions, we collect feedback, we make revisions. And so there is that opportunity as we move forward through this process to continue making those tweaks and revisions.
This is Mr. Larkins. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Piggyback a little bit more on what Mayor Barnes brought up. The first thing that hit my mind was property values of the current homeowners that have my house and then a duplex right beside it and a townhouse right beside it. What's that going to do to my single family property values? That's something we definitely have to take into consideration. They talk about putting in multi family units in with single units.
All right. So hearing some.
This is Randy. Kind of working with what the mayor just said and what Mr. Larkins just said, trying to kind of, instead of having a patchwork where you're going from single family to the more medium or higher density residential, shown on the proposed land use map as the tan to the brown, back to tan, back to brown. And also the mayor wanting to suggesting pushing items up closer towards Broadway. Would it be possible to consider moving, instead of having the higher or the medium density residential on First Avenue, drop that back down to Second and squeeze it towards the east? That way you would have your medium residential off of like Central and Second, with the single family surrounding that all the way. That way you've got more of a gradual change from one type of residential to another.
Right. I mean, does that make sense, bro? Well, that makes, yeah. You wouldn't want townhouse there right there, Dad's.
Randy, when you, if you get a chance, could you maybe, I'm having some trouble myself imagining that. Would you be able to, just like sketch something up and send it over to us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Not necessarily right now, but just saying in the future.
Right.
All right. So just to kind of recap, I mean, it sounds like that that area needs to be cut off a little bit closer to the municipal hall. There's some concerns about it maybe being too dramatic of an increase in density in comparison to the rest of the area of West. And there's some concerns about the implications dense development would have on property values. Any other closing thoughts really quick, because like to give Kerry an opportunity to go over his concepts. All right, so with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Kerry here in a minute. Just again, I want to note that what we're trying to do here with these development concepts and infrastructure concepts is to get your perspective whether they're okay to bring to the second public meeting. We want people to have options to pick from. As you can see in those packets, there are a couple of concepts that have different options. But really, we want you all, if there's something you would see as a red flag, just to let us know so we can revise it. And so with that, Kerry, I think I will turn it over to you for about the next 40 minutes or so.
Okay. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me today. So I'll get through this as quickly as I can. Certainly stop me if you would like to discuss something or have comments of any type. So this first sheet really shows the entire village and 3 areas we've looked at to date, A, B, and C. A around First and Augustus, B along Broadway between 3rd and 4th, and C, which is the area which was depicted as park on the future land use plan. I should also mention that the concepts as we get into it, they're all in keeping with the proposed future land use plan. So you go to the next slide. So starting here, we looked at area A, again, kind of bounded by First and Augustus. The first caveat is I'll say, I know that there are some existing homes. For the purposes of these first 2 concepts, I pretended that it was a blank site. I've got another one that takes that into consideration. So the first concept, A1, which is the diagram on the left, it's a mixture of duplex and single family. And I would say that this is something that's going to be true in all the illustrations today. I consider single family and duplex, it's very easy to interchange that. It's a typology that doesn't necessarily look very different. I understand the trepidation of having single family duplex and then a much larger building, and I'm kind of on board with that. I get that, and we're not proposing that anywhere. It's not anywhere. So this one basically just fills in the gaps along First and Augustus. There's an internal part that has a small neighborhood green with a street that basically connects Augustus in kind of a loop. The other thing that you'll notice on this, in fact, on several of the concepts, is my preference is a personal preference for alleys, especially in single family. One thing that is an unfortunate consequence of having front-loaded garages is the garage becomes the dominant feature of the house, and if possible, one advantage of having alleys is that you have a much more pleasant pedestrian experience when you're not walking across people's driveways. There's less conflict between automobiles and pedestrians. So it could certainly be the other way, but for the purposes of a lot of what I've done, I've shown alleys as a means of serving cars for single family or duplex. And then the diagram on the right, I'm showing a combination of 3-plex, 4-plex along First Avenue and Augustus. That could easily be single family, that could be duplex, it could be any combination, but for the purposes of this, it's a slightly higher density. And then behind that is more of a traditional senior housing facility. This is about 75 units, so it would probably be around 3 stories tall. You can see that the primary entrance is in First Avenue, would be a turnaround, and then all the parking would be held behind the units on Augustus. That's really it on that first two. Any questions? No? You want to flip to the next one, Michael?
Yep.
So as indicated, this one is, again, it's a combination of single family and duplex, but this one, with the exception of one lone house, which is kind of in the middle, would be very difficult to do much back here without taking one house, but this one basically fills in the blank. So along Augustus, north of First, I've got a 4-plex and a 3-plex. That could be single family. You're going to get pinched, obviously, as you can see, the further south by that 4-plex. And then we come in really right across from Mayor's Park, and there's kind of a little neighborhood green like Plan A1. Again, an alley. It could be. You wouldn't have to do that. I think there are, again, advantages to that, as I discussed. So that's really it for A1 in terms of three concepts for that one. Questions? No? Okay.
So we'll move on to this. This will be the 4th page. It's conceptual development plan B1.
So on this one, again, it's a combination of commercial that is along Broadway, faces Broadway. I'm depicting a 6,000 square foot building and a 5,400 square foot building. You'll notice on this one that the parking is held behind the building. There's a breezeway that would enable patrons from the businesses to walk between the buildings. These will obviously face Broadway, and again, all the parking is held behind. South of that, I'm showing an 8,000 square foot building that I'm envisioning, at least for the purposes of this plan, it would be office. So it could be a combination of dentist, doctor, insurance agent, something like that, but it'd be a single story building. I know there's a car wash there now. If that were to remain, I think it would probably behind that infill single family, because at that point, I think you'd be hard pressed to park it. So that was a rationale for at least considering long-term if this were to redevelop on that corner parcel. And then the balance of it, to someone's earlier point, you'll notice on the housing on 3rd, there are, as you proceed towards Wallace, I'm showing predominantly single family because there's single family across the street. Now, I am showing a 4-plex, but you'll notice across the street that's vacant right now. That could certainly be single family, it could be duplex. The balance of what I'm showing along 4th and then you turn the corner to Wallace, that's all attached, could be townhome, condominium, in parking behind, so there's alleys that serve all these units from the rear. And then on the south side of 4th, I'm showing a 4-plex and a triplex. That could be single family again. I'm showing a way of parking behind, so again, there'd be no driveways that you'd be crossing to be visible from 4th Street, or 4th Avenue rather. So that's that one. If you go to the next one, Michael, they're very similar in character, but you'll notice that the commercial on this one is more of what I would say traditional commercial, whereby the parking is in front of the building. So you would have a lot between Broadway and the buildings. They're set back a little bit further. That's an 8,400 square foot building and a 6,000 square foot building. The office that is occupying the current car wash site that's remaining. And then along Third, on this one, I'm showing duplex again, as I've indicated. I think that's interchangeable. That can easily switch to single family. But again, I think from a building standpoint and typology, it's much more similar to what's across the street. And the balance of the infill is the same as B1. Are there any questions about this site area?
This is Mayor Barnes. I don't have any questions, but just a suggestion that on these concepts, because of the different colors and angles and the different diagrams, that maybe we could add a legend to those so that they could be more accessible to understand them a little better.
Okay.
Thank you, but they do look nice though.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Mayor Barnes, this is Matt Brown. Would it be okay to just put labels onto the graphic as far as, you know, the commercial piece, the office piece, and the residential piece?
No, what we're seeing is that it's basically if that you got your tan color, what they represent, you got your green, what they represent, you got your, I guess that's sort of a
yellow
brick color, and what it represents. Pretty much is what I'm saying, basically. If you're putting labels on the buildings, then that would probably, and if we're talking about commercial and industrial, that's another option. So I was just looking. I'm just used to reading legends. That's all. So whatever identifies what needs to be identified is fine, so that people understand a little better what you're talking about. Because who was just speaking? I didn't get your name.
Matt Brown.
No, before you, Matt. Who was?
Oh, Carrie?
Carrie, yeah. See, Carrie was speaking a lot of this pretty smoothly in layman's terms for what they do, but then as he was going along, you'd be looking back at something else, and then well, what were you just talking about? And you could just glance over at the legend and understand a little better. That's all. That's all I was saying.
That's easy to add. I'm happy to do that.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Do you want to move on to the next page?
Yep. And I'll say with a caveat to the landowner that has some of this zoned industrial, I certainly appreciate that. But for the purposes of this is just depicting how this could develop as a public park. I would say a very passive public park. Basically, there's a perimeter path that comes from Maple Street, loops around in the woodlot. That's more the southern 2/3 of the property. We're depicting a open shelter that's kind of more in the northern part, and then a multi-purpose field. It's not a developed field. There's no backstops or anything. It's basically just turf and trees. So you could picnic on it. You could have a pickup football game, throw frisbee, baseball again with a backstop. We were showing a small parking lot at the corner of 4th and Maple, just north of the church. And then we're illustrating, kind of hard to see on this, I think, but a kind of some sort of low perimeter fence along the public streets that, again, depict this as a public park. So there's no, I think it just would read a little bit better. People might understand it. Also would help to have some signage. So really, that's about it on this. Again, just turf, trees, path system, and an open shelter, and a small parking lot. And it's about 10 acres, about 10.2.
Well, yeah. That's not only property.
I had a little bit of trouble hearing that.
Steve, did you have a comment on this one, Development Plan C?
No, I was kind of talking to myself. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. All right, if no one has any other, anybody have any comments on this one, or are we good to move on to the next? All right, I guess we'll move on to the next page. Go for it.
So the next two really illustrate, it's more about massing. So this is looking east on 3rd Avenue. This is depicting single family detached. Again, pretty traditional. This really isn't about designing buildings, but I think the highlights are what I would consider to be more of a traditional 2-story house with a front porch, sidewalk, street trees. Again, this would be, there's no driveways here, so this is obviously being served by an alley. That's really about it. So it just kind of gives you a sense of what that street would look like with houses on it. And then the next one, Michael, if you go to the next one, in 3rd and 4th, this shows infill on 3rd, that's single family. You can see an attached townhome. It would face the tracks. And I mentioned on that one that we actually have it's a triangular piece of property, so we kind of squared it off, and I think you got the opportunity to have some green space in there and set that building way back from Wallace. And again, on 4th, those are shown as triplexes right now, but it certainly could be single family or could be duplex. Again, I think those things are very easily interchangeable. And then just some very simplistic massing of what the buildings would look like that are up on Broadway, the larger structures. That's it on that. We go to the next one, Michael?
Yeah, does anybody want to chime in on this one, or are we good to move on? All right, so we'll go to, this is the series where there's like 4 different boxes of examples. That's the page we're on.
So again, this is not really intended to be so much about picking a building style, but more what the building's kind of doing in a broader context. So I certainly consider the structure in the upper left to be much more of a traditional looking house with a front porch. And the one on the right, traditional, I think, in terms of its form, but much more modern, kind of contemporary materials to it. One thing that we discussed on a call the other day that I will have done for a public meeting is what's implied here, but it's not illustrated. I need to get it that way. Is that I would like the ones on the top to depict what the character would be in an alley load where you don't have a lot of driveway cuts. So that's where I'm going to go with that. The ones at the bottom, one on the left, a little bit more contemporary, but loaded from the street. So you can see that these are pretty small lots, but again, front loaded. Then the one on the right, handsome but extremely modern. Again, illustrating driveways or garages would be sort of from the street. Any questions?
This is Mr. Larkins. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was concerned maybe, like I know this isn't the final draft, but are we considering any ranch style homes?
That's actually a really good question, and I need to get that in there. So this 4 may turn into a 6, because I was actually had to go run some errands over lunch, and I was thinking on the way back, and it was obviously too late to change this. That one thing I think would be important to have that. One is just to have that style, but one huge advantage of a ranch is much more. It enables residents to age in place a lot more easily than a 2-story house. So I need to add that. That's a good catch.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, you want to go to the duplex, Michael?
Yep.
I like that duplex.
Okay, so again, it's not so much about style. I would consider all these to be pretty traditional. The one on the upper right, maybe a little bit less so. The one on the lower left, more of a bungalow. I think Same thing on this one. I'm going to find some examples that depict, I think the one on the upper right clearly shows driveway served from the street. Now, admittedly, it's a detached garage that's behind, but you've still got a driveway interrupting the rhythm of the street. Lower left is clearly served from behind. So I'm going to try and do the same thing I did on the single family with the duplex. But I would like to find a ranch duplex as well. I think that could certainly be depicted on this one as well. Any questions? No? This is showing kind of a range of examples of multi-unit attached. We're going to change the title on this. Multifamily can leave a bad taste in people's mouths, so it might be, wording might be a little bit better to say multi-unit. And I think these are a little bit more towards the traditional. The materials get a little bit more modern, but kind of a range of what they could look like. That's really about it. I think they're all similar in the sense that, especially the upper right and the left and the lower right, what it could look like if they're pushed back substantially from the street, and kind of the character that more generous, more space obviously between the unit and the street. Any questions about this? So on this one, these are intended to be considerations for the Broadway frontage. So the upper left is a brick and pier, or rather brick pier and an evergreen hedge. The consideration is along that frontage, and to some extent it depends on how it develops. The first example, if you recall, where the buildings would be pushed more to the street and the parking is held behind, this would be a little bit less of a consideration. But I think long term, if there could be a consistent treatment that kind of embodied that entire stretch of Broadway as it develops / redevelops would be a good thing for the village. So again, the upper left, this actually is taken at Easton. It's very simple. Evergreen hedge, again, with the intent that you're still going to recognize if there's a parking lot, but you're not looking at car bumpers and license plates and grills of cars. So I think it's a fairly simple, straightforward way of kind of ameliorating kind of a bad view. The upper right is certainly a more expensive option. For those of you familiar with Reynoldsburg, this is East Main Street, a little bit east of 270. It was done maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. I think they did a great job with it. So in certain spots, they've got brick walls, really extensive landscaping. If you go this time of year, there's a gazillion daylilies. It's very, very pretty, really nice street trees. The lower left, now this is depicting, this would be more akin to, again, A1, where the buildings would be pushed to the street, but how you would treat if you had some sort of dining patio or some other amenity immediately behind. So that's a low stone wall and a decorative fence. And then the lower right, it's obviously Grandview Yard, really the most expensive of the options, but that's a stone wall with very extensive landscaping as well. But the point of, I think, all of these is, how do you treat that frontage? And I think it's especially a consideration if there's parking lot between the street and the buildings. How's that going to look as you walk or drive by? Any questions about that? No? Go to the fencing, Michael?
Yep.
So these originally, I was thinking about how you would delineate parks. I need to add to this, I think, for the commercial frontage. So I need to give that a little bit more thought. But these are basically, if you've got a public park, I think having a simple perimeter fence is a really nice way of identifying is it a park and contains it. So again, these run from the upper left, a metal post and rail. The one on the upper right, the steel pipe with wood post, would be considerably more affordable than the upper left. And then kind of a traditional 4-rail wood fence, the lower left. The lower right is a much stouter. It's a look I actually really like. But, just a simple 2-rail fence and a chunkier post. So those are 4 ways that you could. Again, these are predominantly envisioned as how you might delineate public space. And then the last slide, Michael, is lighting. So the upper 2, A and B, upper left and right, are 2 options for what residential street lighting might look like, and the lower left and lower right, what commercial lights would look like. So I'm envisioning if you were to put street lights on residential streets, that's the upper left and right. And then the lower one, what would you do along Broadway if those lights were to be replaced? But there's also a consideration for banners. There's only one depicted, the lower left. But I think we talked about this, Matt. I think there are a couple of streets where you get to the tracks that if that were a preference, they could certainly have banners added to them, even on the residential side. So I'm sure, as you know, there's a myriad of possibilities as it relates to street lighting. I think the upper ones, the residential, I would consider those personally to be much more traditional. And the lower left, a little bit more modern, and then the lower right, traditional, I suppose. But the intent, I suppose, of all of them is that there's certainly a decorative element to them. The lower ones are certainly a cut above a traditional overhead, wood pole with overhead light on it. So, and that's all I have.
So to turn it back to the working committee's court, are there any of these elements to you that stand out as like, no, we can't take this to a public meeting, or are they generally something that you think the community, one of them they would be agreeable with?
I think they're ready to go to the public hearing. Oh, but of course, yeah, I agree, but mention the ranch style homes in there for the public hearing.
Yep.
Yeah, with the revisions that Kerry said he would do, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's ready to go.
Wonderful.
Anyone else?
Yeah, this is Mayor Barnes. Before we take it to the community, the revisions that we discussed here today, I would like to see those included. Maybe a copy could be sent out to everyone's email so that they could view that and see what those look like on paper. It would be good. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, we can definitely arrange getting paper copies sent out to everyone. Do you feel it's necessary to have another meeting, or do you feel comfortable, having those revisions done and then move on to a public meeting?
Well, basically, that's still up to the committee, but I do believe decisions before we go to the public meeting. Whether we have to have another meeting or not before we go to the public, that's up to the committee as a whole. I would just like to see the revisions before we do that, before we go to the public.
Okay.
I agree with the mayor. I don't think we need another meeting. I'd just like to see a copy of it before the meeting.
And if there are issues concerning the revisions, then they'll just have to be discussed in the public meeting.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, we can, as soon as Kerry gets the revisions together, I'll send them out to everyone, and you can let me know what you think. Send me an email, call me, however you want to contact me, and we can go from there.
And in the revisions, I would like to, this is Mayor Barnes, I'd like to see that just because when you things up on the walls and communities actually going around and looking, I have a view map that's going there. That's what I really want to see happen.
Mayor Barnes, this is Matt Brown. We're having a really hard time hearing you. Sounds like somebody may be shuffling papers or something.
Oh, that was me. Sorry.
Mr. Cooley, you're supposed to be on mute.
So, Mayor, could you repeat what you were saying?
Yeah, but just saying that in a public forum, when when you put up the, your renderings and everything on the walls, when the public walks around and takes a look at them, and then I know there's going to be some survey questions, things like that, that they'll be able to understand what they're looking at from the legend. So it just makes things a little more easier to work with and give a little more understanding to what they are looking at. And then with the other comments that were made with those revisions, the ranch styles and all of those things included, I would just like to see that before we put that out there, so that we can at least see what it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, we could, like with some of the housing styles, have descriptions that go along with it, just calling out different features, roof lines and window types and stuff. So we could definitely expand on some of those design concepts and make it so it's something everyone who can understand, who doesn't necessarily work in the industry.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I have to keep my mask on because I'm with some people sitting around as we are meeting. So I'm just trying to stay in compliance.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, so
Michael, real quick, I just wanted to note. So yeah, Carrie Reeds is going to make the kind of edits, adding to some of the concepts and that type of thing that we've discussed. It didn't sound like we had any revisions that we would actually be making to the proposed future land use map at this time, but there are items that we know we need to discuss, specifically the single family duplexes and multi-unit or townhomes on first, second, third, I believe it was, east of Main Street. So we'll make sure that in our public engagement process that we ask specific questions about those areas to get feedback of if they should be shown differently, if the area that they're located in should be moved, those types of things.
During our discussion on the consolidation, bringing the single-family the duplex townhouses closer towards Broadway, you guys asked me to get you a kind of a diagram, a real quick diagramming of what we were discussing. Would that be included in the plan prior to going to the meeting?
Yes.
I thought that's what you guys were looking for.
Yeah.
So that was, I think that discussion, Randy, was you were proposing, I think, single family just south of the Y, maybe on the north side of First, and then on Second, that's where there might be some single family and duplexes, and then Third, I think maybe the same thing, and then further south would be back to single family. Is that correct?
Oh, are we talking east
that,
of the track?
That sounds correct. Yes. First Avenue would be the single family detached, which would be the yellow, and then go into right off of Second Avenue into the single family duplex, and in the medium density towards Central Avenue.
Okay. Michael, could you flip back in the presentation real quick? We're going back to the proposed land use map, just real quick so I can get an understanding here. One of the reasons for the recommendation as it is shown was that you have so many community amenities there where Village Hall, where Village Hall is. You've got the Village Hall, you've got the Y, you've got the outdoor play spaces and recreational facilities. You have the apartments there to the north, and it's in proximity to Broadway, which is a transit route. So that was the rationale for putting that kind of range of residential in that particular location. I'm just curious about the only piece that I'm really kind of curious about was the single family on the kind of the north end of that along First Avenue. So Randy, do you think that the single family just south of all of those amenities in the village would be the the best way or the best use of that kind of street, if you will, given all the amenities that are in that proximity? Randy, did you?
Yeah, I'm here. Mayor and I were talking about that real quick.
Okay.
With the potential for a park right across the street, single family, possibly up to a single family duplex would probably be okay, but you probably wouldn't want to go any higher than that.
Okay, so that'd be like the tan collar.
More of a smooth transition between the median on out to maybe the single family duplex combination and finally on out into the single family detached.
Okay. Michael, did you catch that?
Yeah, I think I've got it. But Randy, if you could still send me like a diagram just so I could take a look at it, and we'll think we could incorporate. We could have, an options the next public meeting if that's something that people would want to do.
Yeah, I will definitely get you some information over just to make sure that we're all on the same page. No problem.
All right, that sounds good. Michael, do you want to jump in and talk about what we're thinking for this next public engagement process?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a date selected. The meeting is, we're not able to do any in-person meetings right now because of COVID-19, and cases continue to increase. So we'll have to do some sort of virtual format, basically like this, and do a presentation for it. And then along, the way, kind of like today, open the floor up for questions and answer. That way we don't do like a 45-minute presentation and at the end, we have to take a bunch of questions on all of the content, so that way we can have stopping between. But yeah, we are thinking of presentation and then question and answer during that presentation.
So with the presentation, just so everybody recognize or understands, we will be providing a presentation on at least a brief overview of the results from the first public meeting, so that everybody can see or hear that information, just as the working committee did a number of meetings ago. We always like to be transparent and let residents know, what we did hear from them in that first public meeting. From there, we'll present the revised vision statements that were created and the working committee agreed to based on that public feedback. And then there'll be presentation on the draft goals and actions that are in the document right now, along with a presentation of these, the proposed future land use map, the transportation improvements map, and also these concepts that the Neighborhood Design Center has put together to get people's perspectives on those concepts. So that's I guess just a little more detail on what the presentation will entail. Our intention, Mayor Barnes, you indicated that the village would be able to do some door-to-door delivery, I think, of surveys. Is that correct?
This is Randy speaking on behalf of the mayor. He said, yes, that is acceptable.
Okay, thank you, Randy. So when we get our feedback forms developed, we'll get hard copies to the village to get it out to the residents. We'll have something on there asking them if it's okay with the village. Also, we'll ask them to just return those feedback forms to Village Hall, and we can pick up from Village Hall then. But we will also have just like we did the last time, we'll have the feedback form available online for those that might want to do it online. In addition, we will be recording the presentation that's given at that for the public engagement. We'll be recording that and putting that on our website also, right next to the feedback form, basically, that there'll be links for that, so that anybody that didn't engage in the live event will be able to see the presentation as it was given and hear the questions and the answers from residents.
Mayor Barnes, this is Michael. I do have a kind of an administrative question for you. Would you all have the ability to put a link to the project portal, our project portal, on Urbancrest website?
You broke up on me. I couldn't understand what you were saying.
Would you all be able to post the link to the project portal on Urbancrest website if I send it to you?
If you send it to me, yes, we can do that.
Okay, great. I think that's about it. We're almost at 5:30. Matt, do you have any closing comments, or we?
Just to thank everybody for staying engaged and with this process. We know it's a very unique time. It's a very unique time to be conducting a community planning project. It presents unique challenges to get the public feedback and engagement, but that is a very important part of any community planning project. And so we're going to do the best we can to get that feedback. Appreciate you all bearing with us through this and staying engaged. So thank you.
Thank you, and we will be posting that the information that you send. We'll put it under our village on our website.
Sounds great. All right. Yeah. Thanks again, everyone, and take care.
Your time.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Everyone stay safe.
Okay. Coolie out.
Great job.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Night, John
Great
boy.
job. Good job, Michael.
Thank you.